So I've talked about nitrogen. I'm almost done. I've got 2 more slides, 3 more slides. There's a triumvirate. We've talked about the phosphorus, we've talked about the nitrogen, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about contaminants of emerging concern, because that was the other issue that was brought up. So Silent Spring Institute has been leading a charge to help people understand what the risk is, the potential risk, what they find. And they've published 3 seminal papers about Cape Cod and what they've seen for contaminants on Cape Cod. And I think these papers actually provide a really valuable context for us to see what's been happening. So I studied them. And I am going to give you some of the findings from those actually published papers. The first one I think is fascinating. They looked at, in 2006, they looked at a septic system. And what they did is they took this septic system in the leaching field and they drove a number of groundwater wells at 3 different locations, 4 different wells, going down to 6-7 meters. And they started looking at these contaminants. They had a host of 9 different contaminants, and they watched. The concentrations close to the surface were high. The concentrations as you went down 1 meter, 1.5 meters, 2 meters, kept on going down. Even at 5 meters, you were seeing concentrations of these chemicals of emerging concern that they were measuring. But when you get to 6 meters, they're gone. Below detection limit, they were gone. They had been biodegraded, and it was for everyone. And when I looked at that, and I saw the charts, and I saw everything going to 0, I thought that was a very important thing for us to know. So that was one study. Later, much later, in fact, this year, Laurel Shader, who is known to many of us, studied 20 public drinking supply wells across Cape Cod. And in this paper, they found no endocrine disruptors in any of those wells. They didn't find hormones, they didn't find alphenols, and they didn't find other constituents that they expected to see that are associated with wastewater. They didn't find caffeine, which is something that's commonly associated with wastewater, and they also didn't find something called a musk fragrance, which is often in wastewater as well. So that, I think, is a very important piece of information for us to have. Now, you also go in and you look at the data sets from this paper, and you see that they found some flame retardants and some surfactants, but in 1, 3, 4, and 5 wells. So 5%, 5%, 15%, 20%, and 25% of the wells. Not 50% of the wells, not 90% of the wells. They didn't find them in 95% of the wells to 75% of the wells. And I think that maybe doesn't sell newspapers, but I think it's what their data actually reveals. And the third paper, which I think a lot of us who have looked at these contaminants and their impact have probably know about, is called a pond study. The Silent Spring selected specific ponds based on whether they had high concentration of septic systems around them or low concentrations of septic systems around them. And what they found, not surprisingly, is that the ponds that had a high concentration of development in septic systems around them had high concentrations of contaminants of emerging concern. They also report in that paper that in that pond, they could smell the septic. So there was a clear indication that these were probably cesspits. They don't report the actual technologies that people have for septic systems, but if you're smelling the septic, you don't have a soil absorption system. That's pretty much given. So there's some context. The other thing that's important to know is there are no current environmental health standards, and there are no environmental standards for any of these. And I think it's because the data is still coming in, and people are still trying to understand what we should be concerned about and what concentrations and what's the causality, because that's a pretty important part of all this. I'm going to state the obvious, which is when there are standards, the wastewater treatment facility is going to meet the standards. It's going to have to. There's no question that EPA comes out with a standard, and you are going to be in violation of a permit if you don't meet the standards. So I think given this, this is where we're going to stand with contaminants of emerging concern. This is my next to last slide, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I think what I'm going to say quickly about this is the existing catch basin system doesn't catch any of the runoff from 28A. We have a huge debt of gratitude to Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuaries for seeing an opportunity and making it happen. When they saw that Route 28 was getting worked on by Mass DOT, they knocked on the door and made sure that something happened to fix that stormwater system because it needed fixing. So thank you, honestly. It's a great improvement. It's a really significant improvement, and the more I look at it, the more I'm impressed by it. So a third of the whole catchment area is Route 28A, and it doesn't go into the current catch basin right now. As soon as this project is finished, there are going to be a series of deep catch basins along Route 28A that do pre-treatment. That is, get rid of some of the detritus, some of the coarser solids. And from there, all of that will flow into a secondary infiltration system. And this is a labyrinth. It's a monolith. They're going to be putting in, and this is between the road and Crocker Pond, a series of basins, catch basins and infiltration pits that are 9 feet by 30 feet by 10 feet, a number of them. I mean, it's a big system. So the idea is to pre-treat and then allow settling before any of the solids get into the pond. And that's for 28A. So upstream, the catchment system that's there now just deals with Thomas Landers Road and the interchange. And what they're adding to, they're adding to that. So they're putting upstream of the existing catchment system. First they're going to rehab it. Then they're going to add another deep sump catch basin, 6 feet deep by 6 feet wide. Again, pre-treatment for clarification in that first sump, secondary pre-treatment at the existing catch basin, and then back into our labyrinth for a third level of settling. And that's how you get rid of the nutrients in stormwater. You have to settle out the solids, you've got to settle out the fines. And so the system does that through these series of cascading catch basins and leaching pits. They have said that because of their design that 40 to 70% of the phosphorus and the nitrogen will be removed because of it. And so if you do the arithmetic based on EPA numbers for the concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus in stormwater, you get some pretty good numbers. You get either from 4 to 7 kilograms of phosphorus and 4 times that, and 5 times that in nitrogen. So some big numbers by getting rid of stormwater. So that's why I say thank you to Salt Pond, because they did a great thing. You'll be seeing this happening pretty soon. Last slide. I've tried to paint a picture that the environmental analyses show no impact based on discharge from Site 7. That's not the end of the story. These are not studies that are then